I see the words and the framing, and knowing what I know about critical race theory and about radical feminism and about Marxism, and reading their language and reading the words that they use, I know what they mean when they say white supremacy. They don't mean
Right.
KKK Nazi types. They mean people that believe basically in the founding principles of the United States, basically that believe in the culture that we've built here that has led us to be the most productive and richest and safest and strongest country in the history of the planet. That's what they mean when they say white supremacy. They basically mean white culture, and what they mean is American culture. And so now basically anybody that believes in individualism or punctuality or objectivity or data or working hard, they're now terrorists. How are you going to fight that notion, Joe, in Congress? What is your action plan when a guy like me, who never wanted to talk about race ever, grew up Gen X, had no notion of racism, anything like that. It was totally a reasonable thing that we were all just living here together, as exemplified by that DMX video of him at Woodstock in 1999, where he is in front of 100,000
Yeah.
white guys all screaming the
Right.
N-word a million times over in his song. That was like peak race relations right there. A guy like me that had no interest in race, not want to talk about it. And here I am being dragged into this discussion, kicking and screaming. We used to think it was just college kids on campuses talking a bunch of nonsense. We used to just write it off as maybe some people in media or maybe some people in universities. We even wrote it off a little bit when Kamala Harris was using the words of radical feminism during the Kavanaugh hearing at the Supreme Court or in the Congressional Judiciary Committee. But now the president of the frickin' United States of America is using CRT language in a joint session address that is meant to be parsed. It is meant to be analyzed word by word. It is very carefully constructed and written. It is officially part of the government record. They put those words in there on purpose. What do you say to a guy like me who listens to the words that they're saying and gets concerned? Very, very concerned.
Yeah. Well, we all need to be concerned, because I think you hit the nail on the head when you said that for years, conservatives or even people that just weren't necessarily all that into politics, they may have heard some CRT stuff here and there. They may have heard some 1619 Project stuff here from like the crazy kids on campus or from somebody on the far, far left. And they're just like, these goofballs. I mean, isn't that kind of funny? And they went back to living their lives. But the next thing you know, that's getting put into the government. And there's a whole generation of kids that have been brought up with this stuff drilled into their heads, just in the way that, I mean, the exact opposite way that we came up in Gen X, where we knew that there was some bad parts of our racial past, but by and large we are over them. And there was this huge mesh of all cultures, but especially white and black cultures. But it's really crept into our institutions. So as an elected official, I am hoping that in 2022, this America First movement that I'm proud to be part of takes the House and the Senate back, so that we can push back at the legislative level. We can get rid of stuff like the Equality Act. We can cut off federal grants for anything that touches CRT, 1619, Planned Parenthood, because Congress controls the purse strings, and we really need to exercise that power to take away the tools, to take away the funding from the federal government to be able to implement these programs. I'd like to get rid of the Department of Education, because I think that's just out of control at the federal level. So just abolish that whole thing. But for lack of being able to just totally abolish it, I would say cut off a lot of their funding that goes to CRT and all that type of stuff. If we don't take back the majority and we are limited in what we can do legislatively, it's our absolute duty to fight back as hard as we possibly can when this narrative gets put forward. So there just needs to be way more conservatives coming out and saying, hey, did you hear what Joe Biden said last night about white supremacy? Here's what white supremacy means, what you just laid out. And then here is why it's wrong. Here's why what he said is absolutely, totally wrong. And when these intelligence agencies come out and they say, oh, we totally agree that the number one threat to America is white supremacy. Okay, Congress, hold a hearing. There's something called the House Intelligence Oversight Committee. Those guys are accountable to the American people. They're accountable to the president. The president appoints them. Understand that. But Congress's oversight role, again, is in the forefront. So, I mean, my 20 years in special operations, I worked heavily with the intelligence community. When I retired from the military, I worked for the CIA for a little bit. I was a paramilitary operations officer. I've been through their training. I understand the questions to ask. I I want to call these people to the carpet and have them explain to me. Show me the intelligence. If we have to go into a skiff to do it, I don't think we do because I don't think it exists. But if we have to go into a secret room so they can show me the secret intelligence that says that white supremacy is about ready to overthrow America, then yeah, please do. Please show me that. And then please also show me the same intelligence that said that like Russia totally swung the tide of 2016 and there was WMDs in Iraq. I want to see all that because for far too long, we have let these intelligence agencies say, hey, we know what's best for you guys. We'll tell you, but we can't tell you how we can't show you our math. We can't show you how we got there. You just got to trust us. And when has that worked out before? So there's a lot on the accountability side, but overall, I think it's educating people as to what these narratives mean.
Yeah. Accountability. Trust is gone. The trust me thing is gone. It's 100% gone. And you're right in the sense that we need to bring more awareness about what CRT is to regular folks. What do you say to the regular person, not the media guy, not the SJW type who calls you a racist or whatever, but what do you say to just the regular guy who is just cringes at the idea of even talking about race, right? Like, to them, it's so not an issue that even talking about it makes you even kind of feel like you're the bad guy. Like, what do you just say to that regular guy in your district who doesn't have the time to figure it out, who's just working, who's catching headlines in the car and maybe at night when they're putting the kids to bed or whatever? What do you say to that regular guy? What is the story you tell him to get him on board with the things that we're talking about? Because fighting back against CRT at every level is the mission for the next however long until it's gone.
Yeah, I think for someone who's not really living this stuff and really deeply reading into it, I think you kind of just have to start out with how actually racist CRT is, because I think it's normal for people not, especially white people, let's just say it, especially white people, like you don't really want to talk about race because like no good can come from that. I mean, you're just going to get a bunch of crap from people and then someone's going to call you racist. And I mean, I think especially if you're our age or older, like being called racist is a big deal. Like racists are actually literally evil people, some of the darkest parts of our history. And so like when people call you a racist, man, I mean, the natural thing to do is to run away from that and be like, whatever it is I just said, I won't say it again. Just don't call me a racist. But I think pointing out, hey, number one, that is the intent, that they're taking these words and they are intentionally using them. I mean, I think as tragic as so many things have been in 2020, the rise of Antifa, anti-fascists, and then Black Lives Matter, and what they've done to cities, I think that makes half of our case for us. We can just say, hey, look, these guys are weaponizing language, and this is how they do it. They create an organization called Black Lives Matter, and then they burn down cities. And if you're against that, well, I guess you just don't think Black Lives Matter. It's so up in your face that I think we can use that now to help educate some people. Same thing with the anti-fascists. What are you, pro-fascists? Well, no, but why are you guys burning down cities? I mean, very reasonable people can understand this. And then I think you can get a little bit more deeper into what some of this critical race theory actually teaches about how you can never be fully anti-racist. The only people that can ever deem you as being worthy are these few people in culture that want to totally control the language. So it's really a rigged system that you can never repent enough, so that we just need to continue to repent. And really, it's not even about race. It's about uprooting the entire foundations of our country. 1619 really ties in nicely to that, where it's like we have to atone for the original sin of slavery, even though the trajectory of actual American history is the atonement of slavery. We did do that. It's an ongoing project, obviously, but our history is the fact that we did get rid of that ourselves. So I think you have to start out with what's most obvious in people's faces. And Antifa and BLM, as much as they've weaponized language, I think we can twist that right back around on them just because they've been so horrible.
Man, I have lived the BLM Antifa stuff, right? Antifa came after me, doxed me when I was a nobody, a citizen, just a private citizen, doxed me, got me fired, called me a Nazi, all these things. I watched Antifa and Black Lives Matter burn Washington, D.C. I stood there literally with them throwing rocks over my head, rubber bullets coming at me this way, tear gas everywhere, 20 feet away from people looting stores, burning restaurants, 6-alarm office building fire. I mean, I watched them assault cops. I got assaulted. I mean, I've seen it all happen literally in person. I live streamed it. And when I talk to people that are normal, they still don't believe it. They don't believe that Washington, D.C. was boarded up from May 27th all the way through till January 20th, practically, because of Black Lives Matter and Antifa, not because of the Proud Boys. And they just don't understand, and they're unwilling to understand. So I am less optimistic about persuasion in that regard. And I'm more interested in offense at this point. And I'm expecting my congressional representatives and people in Congress and in the government that are on our side, who say they're on our side, to actually be much more aggressive and offensive. Trump waited a hell of a long time to get started on CRT. It might even have been specifically due to the excellent work of Christopher Rufo, who brought all kinds of attention to the matter and brought it and put it in front of the president's face. If he would have started on that day one, we could have made much more progress. What can you do? What can we do? I mean, we've talked about it. We just have to be more aggressive, man. And I think we have to be a little bit more mean. We have to be meaner.
Yeah. I mean, Antifa and BLM, they've destroyed entire cities. They've acted as terrorist organizations. They've acted as organized crime syndicates. So I think getting the federal government to actually go after these leaders, like that's another thing where Congress, if the FBI and the DOJ aren't going to do it, again, there's oversight roles there. Why isn't the FBI director on the floor of Congress right now being grilled by congressional representatives saying, hey, how come these guys aren't being targeted right now? How come I'm seeing, hey, can you help me find the random MAGA hat guy from January 6th who, walked in around the little cone that said he couldn't walk into the foyer of Congress? Like, why am I seeing that all over Twitter, but I'm not seeing, hey, can you help us identify these Antifa guys that are transiting between major cities and burning them down? I mean, those are questions that need to be asked, and Congress is the right tool to do it. But I also think, again, back to federal law enforcement grants, there's been some really disappointing local leaders who've let this stuff fester and local law enforcement people who've let this stuff fester. But there's also some really good law enforcement agencies that have attempted to push back on this, and they've been left hung out to dry by leaders. So I think Congress allocating federal law enforcement grants directly into the hands of departments and sheriffs that will actually go out and enforce the law, I think that's another great tool that we can use. And then also cutting off federal law enforcement funding for governors that refuse to enforce law and order. Like we're in Washington State. My district's right between Portland. My major city, Vancouver, is essentially a suburb of Portland. So we've had Antifa come and encroach into our city before, but we're ran by Jay Inslee, a very activist leftist governor who refuses to deal with any of this stuff, but he still gets federal law enforcement grants. I would cut that off cold. Like, that guy does not deserve one penny of the taxpayers' dollars for law enforcement because he refuses to enforce the law.